The rain hit the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, pounding in time with the ache in my chest. Each drop blurred the world outside, but the truth was already foggy between us. Somewhere between the downpour and the silence, I realized, this was the quiet death of everything we once had. Andrew's hands were strangling the steering wheel. His knuckles had gone bone white under the pressure, and his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching from the corner of my eye. We hadn't said a word since we left his parents' house. We used to fill drives like this with easy conversation, jokes, stories, teasing remarks. Now, the silence between us was a chasm, wide and deep. It had been building for years. Maybe we'd both been pretending for too long, hoping the cracks would somehow mend themselves. I couldn't remember the last time we'd really talked. "Andrew, you can't keep avoiding me," I said quietly. My voice barely cut through the hum of the engine, but it felt like I'd thrown a rock through a glass window. He didn't look at me. "I'm not avoiding you, Holly," he said, flat and mechanical. His eyes stayed locked on the road. "I've just been busy. Work's been intense. You know that." "Of course. Work. Always the same excuse. Every late night, every missed dinner, every moment we used to share, it had all been sacrificed on the altar of his career. I had been relegated to the background of my own life, a supporting character in the play of his success. "I feel like you've forgotten I'm part of this marriage," I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady, to keep the flood of emotions from spilling over. "It's not just about your job, Andrew. What about us? When was the last time we had dinner together? Or even talked about anything other than work?" Andrew's sharp sigh filled the car. "Holly, we've been over this. I'm doing this for us, for our future." I couldn't hold it back any longer. My voice rose with the frustration that had been simmering for years. "What future? The one where I sit alone in this house every night while you're off in some hotel pretending I don't exist?" His head snapped toward me, eyes dark and hard. "Don't start, Holly. Not now. I can't not start. This is our life, my life, and you're not even here to see it." "I don't have the energy for this," he muttered, turning back to the road. I swallowed hard, blinking away the tears threatening to rise. This is how it always went. I reached out, and he pushed me away. I had loved this man once, deeply, but now I didn't recognize him. When had we lost each other? "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice soft, almost to myself. "You're chasing this future, but you're leaving me behind." He sighed again, but this time, it was different, almost pleading. "I'm doing this so we never have to worry. So you don't have to worry." I stared at him for a long moment, the rain streaking down the windows like tears. "I don't need security, Andrew. I need you. I need my husband." His silence was like a slap. We pulled into the driveway, and the house loomed ahead of us, dark and still. Andrew didn't wait for me. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let it close behind him with barely a sound. I stayed outside for a moment, letting the rain wash over me, soaking through my skin. It felt fitting, being left out in the cold. When I finally stepped inside, I found him in the kitchen, pouring a drink. His back was tense, every muscle rigid under the weight of everything we weren't saying. "I want to go back to work," I said. My voice was quiet, but the words sliced through the air like a blade. Andrew froze, the glass halfway to his lips. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What?" "I need to go back to work." The confidence in my voice surprised even me. "I can't just sit around anymore, waiting for you to come home." "No." His response was immediate, firm. "We've talked about this before. You don't need to work. I'm taking care of everything." "That's the problem," I snapped. "You think that's enough. But I need more. I need to feel alive." "Alive?" He scoffed, setting the glass down with more force than necessary. "What does that even mean? You have everything you need." I shook my head, the frustration bubbling over. "I'm disappearing, Andrew. Every day, I feel like I'm fading. I'm not just your wife. I'm a person, And I need something that's mine. You're being ridiculous, he said, but his voice wavered, just for a second. Maybe. But I'm not going to sit here and fade away. Not anymore. He didn't respond. He picked up his drink and left the room, leaving me standing there, shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. For the first time, I realized something. Andrew didn't want to save us. And maybe he never had. Later that night, as I lay beside him in bed, the silence between us was deafening. He slept soundly, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I wasn't going to disappear. Not anymore. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, went to the small desk by the window, and opened my laptop. The screen cast a soft glow on the room as I typed, searching through job listings. It didn't matter what the job was, anything would do. I just needed something for me. Because if Andrew wasn't willing to fight for us, I would fight for myself. And for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. The sharp scent of bleach lingered in the air as I wiped down the counter in room 402, my movements robotic, thoughtless. Outside, the hum of the vacuum echoed through the hallway, a daily ritual I had come to rely on. 3 months into my secret job at the seaside hotel, and each day blurred into the next. A monotonous, strangely comforting routine. It wasn't glamorous. Far from it. But in these sterile hotel rooms, I wasn't Andrew's neglected wife. I was just Holly, anonymous, invisible in the best way possible. Of course, Andrew didn't know. He couldn't. After that argument in the kitchen, I'd known exactly how he'd react. He'd laugh, dismiss me, belittle the need I had for something beyond his world. So, I wove this secret life around him, careful not to tug too hard at the fragile threads of our marriage. Hey, Holly, you almost done? Claire's voice snapped me out of my trance. She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes gleaming with the kind of world-weary humor that always made me feel lighter. Her dark curls, unruly as ever, and the cigarette tucked behind her ear only added to her unapologetic charm. Just need to grab the towels, I said, tossing the cleaning rag into the cart. Claire groaned. God, if I have to scrub one more toilet today, I swear I'm quitting. The things these guests do, I'm convinced it's on purpose. I laughed, a rare sound lately. You might be right. Her eyes softened, searching my face. You good? You've been quieter than usual. I hesitated. Claire knew about Andrew but never asked for details. She was the kind of person who wouldn't push, but she'd always listen. I forced a smile. Just tired. She smirked but didn't press. All right, but you know where to find me if you want to vent about your perfect husband. That evening, the silence of my house swallowed me the moment I walked through the door. Andrew wouldn't be home for hours, he never was. I hung my coat, moving through the stillness like a ghost. My heart used to leap at the prospect of these quiet moments, a glass of wine and a good book in hand. Now, the silence only reminded me of the growing chasm between us. As I made tea, my phone buzzed with a message from Andrew. Running late. Don't wait up. Dinner with a client. A pang of something, anger, sadness, resentment, tightened in my chest. It wasn't the late hours that hurt. It was the way he tossed these excuses at me like crumbs. As though I didn't deserve more than a hurried text. And for the first time, I allowed the thought that had been gnawing at me to surface. What if it wasn't just work? 2 weeks later, the answer came like a punch to the gut. I was mid-shift at the hotel when I heard it, Andrew's laugh. A sound I hadn't heard in years, carefree and loud. I stepped out into the hall, and there he was, standing at the reception desk. His hand rested casually on the shoulder of a blonde woman, younger than me, beautiful in that effortless way. They were laughing together, the kind of shared moment that didn't belong to strangers. My breath caught in my throat. My world shifted beneath me as I watched him, unrecognizable. How long had I been blind to this? How many nights had he come home late, his excuses falling like dead leaves between us? I ducked back into the room, heart racing. I couldn't confront him here, not now, not in front of the staff. I needed time to think. That evening, I sat in the dim light of the living room, waiting for him. The minutes ticked by like hours. My thoughts spiraled, rage, disbelief, sorrow, each emotion sharper than the last. When Andrew finally walked through the door, he looked just as he always did. Calm. Composed. He tossed his keys onto the table, shrugging off his coat. Oblivious. How was the hotel? My voice was tight, controlled. He froze, his face a mask of confusion. What? I saw you, I said, standing slowly. Today. At the seaside. With her. The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly, too quickly. Holly, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me, I cut him off, my voice trembling. Not this time. His silence stretched between us, the weight of it crushing. He looked at me, guilt darkening his features, but it wasn't enough. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been lying to me? His mouth opened, but no words came. And that silence, that terrible, all-consuming silence, told me everything I needed to know. I'm done, Andrew, I whispered, the words a release I hadn't known I needed. I can't do this anymore. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Holly, wait. No. I shook my head. I deserve more than this. I deserve more than you. And with those final words, I turned and walked away, leaving the hollow remains of our life behind me. That night, locked in the guest room, I lay awake. The cracks in my life had shattered, but through those jagged edges, I could see the first glimmer of freedom. For the first time in years, I was free to imagine a life where I wasn't living in the shadows. The morning after I discovered Andrew's affair, the world felt like it had lost its color. My body moved, but it was as if I was underwater, each step heavy, each breath strained. The betrayal sat like a stone lodged in my chest, and the house around me, once our home, had become nothing more than walls, closing in on me. I felt like an intruder in my own life, wandering through a space now filled with ghosts of who we once were. I hadn't spoken to Andrew since last night. I hadn't needed to. The silence between us was more honest than anything we could say. Twice, I'd heard his footsteps approach the guest room door, then retreat, as if he were too much of a coward to confront what he'd done. Neither of us dared to break the fragile quiet that had settled like dust over everything. The buzz of my phone on the nightstand broke the spell. It was Claire. Claire, you okay? Haven't heard from you. I stared at her message. I wanted to spill everything, the hotel, the woman, the lies. But how could I even begin to unravel it all? Me, not really. Let's talk later. I tossed the phone aside and stood, pulling my robe tight as if it could shield me from the coldness seeping into my bones. I couldn't stay in this room forever, no matter how much I wanted to. Eventually, I would have to face him. Face the wreckage. The smell of fresh coffee greeted me as I entered the kitchen, and there he was, Andrew. His back was to me, shoulders hunched as if the weight of the truth was pressing him down. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, like the years had finally caught up with him overnight. For a fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I crossed the room, the sound of the faucet filling the silence between us, a wall that neither of us knew how to climb over. Morning, he muttered, setting his mug down with a soft clink. I didn't respond. The water ran over my fingers, warm but indifferent. I was numb, incapable of finding the right words that could match the devastation inside me. Holly. His voice was softer now, pleading, but I could hear the guilt laced within it. We need to talk. I turned slowly, my arms crossing tightly over my chest. What's there to talk about, Andrew? My voice was a blade, each word sharp. Your affair? Your lies? How you threw away 25 years of marriage? He flinched, as though the truth physically wounded him. It wasn't like that, he started, hands raised as if to ward off the blow. It just happened. I made a mistake. A mistake? My laugh was hollow, bitter. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. This? This was a choice. A series of choices. He stepped closer, desperation written in the lines of his face. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you. Stop. My voice cracked like a whip, freezing him in place. This isn't about what you meant or didn't mean. You did hurt me. You made a decision. Over and over again, you chose to betray me. The silence between us was deafening, a thick wall of unsaid things. I could see the gears turning in his head, the scramble for an excuse, a lifeline. But there was nothing he could say that would make this right. I never wanted it to end like this, he murmured, his voice small, almost childlike. It didn't have to, I shot back, the fire inside me burning brighter. We could have fought for us. But instead, you chose the easy way out. You didn't just break our marriage, Andrew. You broke me. His head dropped, shoulders sagging in defeat. For the first time, I saw him for what he was, a man afraid of his own failure, unable to face the consequences of his actions. I'm done, I said, the words hard and final. I want a divorce. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. No, Holly, please. We can fix this. I'll change. I'll do anything. It's too late. My voice was ice, calm and controlled. There's nothing left to save. He stared at me, mouth opening and closing, searching for the right words. But there were none. He had destroyed us. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Packing was mechanical, each item folded away with the finality of an ending I hadn't seen coming. Claire had offered me her spare room until I figured things out, and I had accepted. Staying in this house, this tomb of broken promises, was not an option. When I zipped my last suitcase, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find Andrew standing there, eyes filled with regret. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the chasm between us too wide to bridge. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking like a man unraveling. I didn't answer. I had no more words for him. I grabbed my bags, walked past him, and didn't look back. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, and for the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. The stars blinked overhead, indifferent to the chaos below, but their light felt like a promise. I was free. The breaking point had passed, and now, it was time to rebuild. I didn't know where I was headed. But for the first time, I knew I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was done with the shadows. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.